Black poor girl rescues billionaire's paralyzed only daughter from kidnappers and help. Somebody stop them. Dawn Green shouted as two men pushed a wheelchair toward a white van near Millennium Park. People turned but froze in shock. Dawn, only 7 years old, ran forward without thinking. Her dark caramel skin glowed with sweat. Her braids tied with mismatched ribbons bounced as she grabbed the wheelchair handle. Her oversized jacket and torn sneakers made her look small, but she refused to let go. Inside the chair, 5-year-old Doris Gibson screamed, her blonde curls falling over her face. Her small legs, paralyzed under a pink blanket, trembled as she reached for Dawn. One of the men shoved Mrs. Carmichael, the nanny, to the ground. Her phone shattered beside her. "Let her go," Dawn yelled. The tattooed man tried to push her away, but she blew hard on the whistle hanging around her neck. The piercing sound made heads turn. A security guard began running toward them. The kidnappers panicked, jumped into the van, and sped away. Dawn knelt beside Doris, hugging her tight. "You're safe now," she whispered. Across town, Blair Gibson's phone rang. His heart dropped as he heard the words no father ever wants to hear. What would you do if you saw a child being taken right in front of you? Would you have the courage Dawn showed? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Tomorrow, we'll share another story that will stay with you. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 3 weeks before the kidnapping, Dawn Green woke up to the faint hum of traffic outside Harbor House Shelter. The room she shared with her mother, Maya, was small, just 2 beds, a shared dresser, and a curtain for privacy. Still, it was home for now. Maya worked long nights cleaning offices downtown. By morning, she returned tired but smiling, dropping a kiss on Dawn's forehead before collapsing into bed. "Be good, baby," she always whispered. "I'll make things better soon." After school, Dawn spent her afternoons at Millennium Park, waiting until her mother woke up. It was safe, open, and filled with children playing. But Dawn usually played alone. Her sneakers were old, her jacket too big, and other kids didn't talk much to the girl from the shelter. One cloudy afternoon, she noticed a small girl sitting apart from the crowd near the accessible playground. The girl's hair was soft and blonde, her skin pale, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her wheelchair gleamed, fitted with buttons and blinking lights. The nanny standing nearby scrolled on her phone, barely glancing up. Dawn hesitated, then walked closer. "Hi," she said quietly. "Do you want to play?" The girl looked up, surprised. "I can't," she said, her voice soft. "My legs don't work." Dawn smiled. "That's okay. I can push you around. We can still play." For the first time that day, the girl's face lit up. "Really?" Dawn nodded, stepping behind the chair. She began to push slowly down the smooth path, pretending they were explorers chasing treasure. "What's your name?" "Doris," the girl said, laughing as the chair rolled faster. "What's yours?" "Dawn." They spent the next hour racing between the trees, feeding pigeons, and inventing stories about secret kingdoms. Doris laughed until she couldn't breathe. Her nanny, Mrs. Carmichael, watched from the bench, grateful someone had taken an interest in the lonely little girl. Doris hadn't laughed like that in a long time. 2 years earlier, her mother had died after a long illness. Since then, the house had been quiet. Her father, Blair Gibson, tried to fill the emptiness with doctors, new wheelchairs, and advanced therapy, but Doris still felt alone, until Dawn appeared. From that day, they met every afternoon at 3 p.m. Dawn always came after school, sometimes bringing half a sandwich or a cookie from the shelter kitchen. She shared everything she had, even when it wasn't much. Doris, in turn, shared her snacks, her stories, and pieces of her world that Dawn had never seen. They talked about missing parents. Dawn's father had left before she was born. Doris said her mother used to braid her hair every morning. Now Mrs. Carmichael did it, but it never felt the same. One afternoon, while feeding pigeons, Doris said quietly, "You know, when I grow up, I want to walk again. My daddy says he's building something that can help me." "Your daddy builds stuff?" Dawn asked. "He owns a big company," Doris said proudly. "He helps people like me." Dawn didn't fully understand what that meant. All she knew was that Doris's father was rich, so rich that even the air around them felt different when she talked about him. But Doris never acted proud. She just wanted a friend. Each day, Dawn pushed her around the park, telling stories about pirates, lost cities, and brave girls who saved their friends. Doris listened wide-eyed, her laughter echoing through the open air. By the third week, their friendship had become routine. Dawn arrived at the park like clockwork, and Doris waited eagerly by the playground gate. Even Mrs. Carmichael had grown fond of Dawn. "You've got a big heart for someone so small," she said once, handing her an extra juice box. At home, Blair Gibson often heard his daughter's excitement over dinner. "Daddy, you should meet my friend Dawn. She's funny and brave, and she tells the best stories." Blair smiled faintly. "Dawn? Her? Where's she from?" "From a shelter, I think," Doris said, her tone innocent. "But she's happy. She doesn't care about that." He nodded, touched but distracted. His company, Gibson Neural Systems, was preparing for its biggest launch yet, a medical technology that could change millions of lives. Between meetings, investors, and late nights at the lab, Blair rarely had time to think about much else. He promised himself he'd meet this mysterious friend soon. While Doris fell asleep in a room filled with glowing night lights, Dawn curled up beside her mother in the shelter bed. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm soup. Maya whispered, "Did you have fun today?" "Yeah," Dawn said with a sleepy smile. "I met my best friend." In two different worlds, one with marble floors and glass walls, another with peeling paint and a single flickering bulb, two little girls found the one thing money couldn't buy: connection. Neither of them knew that in just a few weeks, that bond would be tested in ways they could never imagine. September 15th began like any other afternoon at Millennium Park, the kind that made Chicago shimmer. The sun leaned lazily over the skyline, warming the air until it carried the smell of roasted peanuts, hot dogs, and popcorn. Pigeons strutted boldly near benches while children's laughter rippled across the playground. Dawn sat cross-legged near the sandbox, finishing a juice box, keeping one eye on Doris, who was in her wheelchair near the slide. Mrs. Carmichael, Doris's nanny, sat a few feet away, talking into her headset, something about Blair Gibson's estate manager and a contractor delay. Her attention never left the screen in her hand. Doris, however, had her eyes on Dawn, waiting for their usual game to start. That was when Dawn noticed them, two men by the popcorn stand who didn't belong. They weren't watching the skyline or their phones like everyone else. They were watching Doris. The taller one, with a patchy beard and black cap, leaned against a lamppost pretending to check his watch. The other, heavier, stood too still for too long. Dawn's mother had taught her to notice small things, like people who looked at kids instead of the exits. Something about them made her stomach twist. She walked up to Mrs. Carmichael, tugging lightly on her sleeve. Dawn said softly, "Those men are staring at Doris." The nanny waved her off, annoyed. "Sweetheart, it's fine. Go play. I'm on an important call." But Dawn couldn't shake it. She turned back toward the men. The heavier one nodded once to the other, and suddenly they were moving, fast, direct, no hesitation. Everything that happened next blurred into motion. The big one, Lenny, shoved Mrs. Carmichael so hard her phone flew into the mulch. The bearded man, Jake Scorpion Torres, reached for Doris's wheelchair. Doris screamed, her small hands clutching the armrests. Dawn ran. She grabbed the wheelchair handles before Jake could push it away. "Let her go," she shouted, her voice sharp enough to turn a few heads, but not enough to make anyone move. Jake snarled, yanking the chair, dragging both girls a few feet before Dawn planted her feet into the mulch and held on. Her sneakers slipped, but she didn't let go. Doris's scream cracked through the park. "Dawn, help me. Hang on." Dawn cried back. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own words. Jake growled, reaching down to grab her arm. His hand was rough, calloused, and reeked of motor oil. But before he could pull her away, Dawn ducked and bit down on his hand as hard as she could. He howled, jerking back, blood blooming from the bite mark. Dawn stumbled but remembered what her mother had told her: "If you're ever in danger, blow the whistle." She yanked the small silver whistle from around her neck and blew it with every ounce of air she had. The sound cut through the chaos, high-pitched, urgent, impossible to ignore. A few pigeons burst into the air. Heads turned. Parents gasped. Somewhere near the food stalls, a security guard, Marcus O'Brien, spotted the struggle and started running toward them. Jake cursed, glancing at Lenny. "Forget it, let's go." Lenny grabbed Jake's arm, and they bolted toward a white van idling by the curb. Tires squealed as it lurched away, leaving behind the faint smell of burnt rubber. No plates. No trace. Mrs. Carmichael scrambled to her feet, clutching her shoulder. "Oh my God. Doris." She rushed over, voice trembling. Doris was crying, but unhurt, her face buried against Dawn's shoulder. Dawn's arms trembled as she held onto the chair, refusing to let go even now. Her small frame was shaking from adrenaline, her knees scraped from where she'd fallen. But she looked up at Mrs. Carmichael, eyes wide. "They tried to take her," she whispered. Mrs. Carmichael's hands shook as she picked up her phone. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Mr. Gibson," she stammered, "someone tried to take Doris." "Yes, in the park. No, they're gone now. She's safe, but..." Her voice broke again. By the time the park rangers arrived, the van had disappeared into the city traffic. Witnesses crowded around, murmuring what they'd seen but doing nothing to stop it. Parents clutched their children tighter. Dawn knelt beside Doris, brushing hair from her face. "You're okay," she said softly. "They didn't get you." Doris sniffled, wiping her eyes with trembling hands. "You didn't let go." "Never would," Dawn said. The two girls sat there in the fading sunlight, one in designer clothes, one in second-hand sneakers, bound not by class or luck, but by courage. And for the first time, every adult around them understood that the smallest person in that park had just done something extraordinary. The sound of helicopter blades broke the park's uneasy silence 20 minutes later. Dust whipped across the grass as the sleek black aircraft descended into the emergency zone beside the fountain. People shielded their faces, clutching phones and strollers, while a small convoy of dark SUVs screeched to a stop nearby. Blair Gibson stepped out before the rotors even slowed. His normally composed face, one that had graced countless business magazines, was drained of all color. The billionaire's polished shoes hit the ground hard, splashing through puddles left by the park sprinklers. Security agents fanned out, barking into earpieces, but Blair only saw one thing: his daughter's wheelchair. "Doris." His voice cracked through the air. The little girl turned, and in an instant, his arms were around her. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest while he held her like she was made of glass. Dawn stood a few feet away, her clothes streaked with dirt, her lip trembling. She didn't move. She wasn't sure if she should. Blair turned to her next. "You're the one," he said softly, kneeling so his eyes met hers. He searched her face for the courage that had saved his child. "You saved my daughter." Dawn didn't know what to say. "I just didn't let go." Blair's throat tightened. "Thank you," he managed, voice hoarse. A police officer nearby spoke into his radio, calling for updates. Mrs. Carmichael sat on a bench, crying quietly, still shaking from the attack. Then, from the other side of the park, a woman came running, hair messy, shoes untied, exhaustion written all over her face. "Maya!" a voice called. Dawn spun around. "Mom!" Maya dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms, sobbing in relief. Oh God, I thought I lost you." The officer explained what happened, but Maya barely heard. She looked up at Blair, the billionaire everyone in Chicago seemed to know, and froze, unsure whether to speak. Blair extended a hand. "You must be Dawn's mother." Maya took it hesitantly. "Yes, sir. Thank you for watching over her." He shook his head. "She's the one who watched over my daughter." His tone hardened as he looked at his head of security. "I want them both under protection. Effective immediately." Maya blinked. "Sir, that's not necessary." "It is," Blair interrupted gently but firmly. "Whoever tried to take my daughter might try again. You and your daughter are part of this now. Please, let me keep you safe." Maya hesitated, torn between gratitude and pride. "We don't belong in your world, Mr. Gibson." Doris tugged on her father's sleeve, her voice small but determined. "Please, Daddy. I want Dawn to stay with us." Blair glanced at the two girls, one trembling, the other still wiping away tears. His decision was instant. "Then that's what we'll do." That evening, as the city lights shimmered across Lake Michigan, a black car pulled into the private entrance of Gibson Tower. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors, a stretch of glass, marble, and quiet opulence that seemed to touch the clouds. When the elevator doors opened, Maya froze. She'd never seen anything like it. A chandelier of cascading crystal light bathed the space in gold. The city spread endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Doris led Dawn inside, excitedly pointing to everything as if introducing her to a castle. Blair guided Maya to the guest suite, easily twice the size of the entire Harbor House shelter room they'd lived in. He gave her space, but his gratitude lingered in every word. "You'll stay here as long as it takes. My staff will make sure you're comfortable." Maya nodded, still uneasy. "We don't want charity, Mr. Gibson." "This isn't charity," he said. "It's protection, and a debt I can never repay." Meanwhile, in the penthouse's private security office, Ross Carter reviewed footage from the park. A man in his 50s with graying hair and steady eyes, Ross had spent decades in law enforcement before joining Blair's security detail. His expression stayed calm, but the muscle in his jaw twitched as he replayed the moment Mrs. Carmichael was shoved and the wheelchair was taken. He paused the video. The kidnappers had moved with precision, too much precision. Ross turned to Blair, who stood behind him. "Sir, this wasn't random. They knew her route, her nanny's schedule, even the time you were in your board meeting." Blair frowned. "Meaning what?" Ross leaned forward. "Meaning someone fed them information. Someone close. This was planned from the inside." The words hit Blair like a punch. "Inside?" "Yes, sir." Ross rewound the footage again. They struck when Mrs. Carmichael was guaranteed to be distracted, during her scheduled call with your estate manager. That's not coincidence. Blair's world, built on control and precision, suddenly felt fragile. He looked out the glass wall toward the city skyline, the empire he'd built over 2 decades. Who would do this? Who'd risk everything? Ross's voice was measured. Anyone with something to gain, or something to destroy. Blair's mind raced. His company, Gibson Neural Systems, was 6 weeks away from an $8 billion IPO. The timing was too convenient. A scandal now could destroy everything: his credibility, his investors, even his daughter's safety. Competitors. Former partners. Angry employees. The list was long, and each one had motive. Blair exhaled slowly, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Keep this quiet. No leaks. No press. Ross nodded. Understood. Blair turned toward the hallway where Dawn and Doris were playing with building blocks under Maya's watchful eye. The sound of their laughter drifted softly through the marble corridor. For a moment, it steadied him. "Ross," he said quietly, "until we find who's behind this, they stay here. No arguments." Ross inclined his head. "Consider it done, sir." As the night deepened, the penthouse lights dimmed, but Blair couldn't rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughter's terrified face, and the small girl who refused to let go of her. He knew this was far from over. Someone had declared war on him. And this time, it wasn't about money. It was personal. The first week inside Gibson Tower felt like stepping into another planet. The guest suite where Dawn and her mother stayed was larger than the entire floor of Harbor House Shelter. There was a bed that didn't creak, a bathroom that sparkled like it had never been used, and windows so tall Dawn could see the whole city glowing at night. Still, she couldn't sleep the first few nights. The silence was too clean, too different. She missed the hum of people whispering through thin shelter walls and the sound of her mother's soft prayers before bed. Here, the world outside looked perfect, but it didn't feel like home. Every morning, Doris's laughter filled the penthouse. Her wheelchair glided across polished marble floors while Dawn ran beside her. Blair often paused his work just to watch. His daughter hadn't smiled this much in years. Doris showed Dawn her dollhouse, her art room, her indoor garden, things most kids could only dream about. But even with all her toys, Doris had no friends her age until Dawn arrived. Maya worked quietly in the background, now officially hired as a household assistant. Blair made it clear it was a job, not charity, paying her a fair wage and giving her flexible hours so she could rest. It was his way of helping with dignity, and Maya respected that. Dawn tried to adjust. She followed rules, spoke politely, and tried not to touch things that looked too expensive. She helped Doris with school lessons, joined her for TV shows, and even learned how to use the elevator controls herself. Still, some nights she sat by the window, watching headlights on the streets below, wondering what her friends at the shelter were doing. On the third day, something strange happened. Doris had a physical therapy session at a medical center across town. Blair's driver, one of Ross's most trusted men, handled the transport while a second security car followed behind. Dawn went along, holding Doris's hand. Everything seemed normal until they left the building. Dawn noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine running. It had tinted windows and didn't move even after both cars pulled away. She glanced back several times. It followed for 3 blocks before turning off suddenly. When they returned, Ross met them at the elevator. "Everything all right?" he asked, reading Dawn's worried face. She hesitated, then nodded. "I just saw a car that followed us, but maybe it's nothing." Ross didn't dismiss her. He made a note, thanked her, and checked security footage later that night. 2 days later, on the 5th morning, another odd thing happened. A delivery man arrived at the service entrance with packages for Blair's office. He smiled too much and asked casual questions about Doris, what time she usually went for therapy, what days she stayed home. The housekeeper didn't think much of it, but Dawn froze when she saw his wrist as he handed over the clipboard. A small tattoo, a black scorpion. Her stomach dropped. She remembered biting Jake's hand during the kidnapping, tasting blood and dirt. The same scorpion symbol had been inked just above his thumb. Dawn stepped back, heart racing. She didn't say anything until the man left, then ran straight to Ross's office. "Mr. Carter," she said breathlessly, "the man with the boxes, he has the same tattoo as the one who tried to take Doris." Ross didn't smile or pat her head like adults usually did. He turned serious immediately. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." On his wrist. He called for the security footage and froze the image. There it was, clear as day. The same design. Ross leaned back slowly. "Good catch, kid. You might have just helped us find who's behind all this." He spent the next few hours digging through records. The delivery company checked out, but the man didn't officially work there. His ID was fake. The logo on the truck was painted over another one, Apex Solutions, a private security firm Ross knew too well. That evening, Ross stood in Blair's office with a thick file in hand. "Sir, I think we found our connection. The scorpion tattoo isn't random. It's the emblem of Apex Solutions." Blair frowned. "That's Marcus Webb's company." Ross nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. He runs it out of Denver now. Or what's left of it." Blair rubbed his temples. The name brought back memories he'd buried years ago. Marcus Webb had once been his closest partner, the co-founder of Gibson Neural Systems. Together, they'd built the company from a small startup into a global leader in neural interface technology. But 5 years ago, Webb had been caught selling patient data to third parties for profit. Blair had no choice but to expose him, forcing him out and cutting all ties. The scandal ruined Webb. He lost his wealth, his reputation, and his family. His wife divorced him, his children refused to speak to him, and every investor he knew turned their backs. Ross set the file on the desk. He's been under the radar since, but Apex Solutions still operates quietly. If his men are showing up here, it's not for ransom. Blair's jaw tightened. "No. It's revenge." He looked out across the city, remembering the desperate phone calls Webb had made after the scandal, begging for mercy. Blair hadn't answered any of them. Now, it seemed Webb had found a way to strike back, by targeting the only thing that mattered to him. Down the hall, Dawn and Doris were laughing again, unaware of the storm circling around them. Their world had become one of marble floors and glittering skylines, but danger was creeping closer with every day that passed. Blair turned back to Ross. "Find Webb. Whatever it takes." Ross nodded once. "Already working on it, sir." As Blair's office door closed, the laughter of the two little girls echoed faintly through the penthouse. It was the sound that kept him steady, and the reason he knew he couldn't afford to fail. 3 weeks after the first kidnapping attempt, the Gibson Foundation Charity Gala was the event of the year. The ballroom of the Fairmont Chicago gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, every inch dressed in elegance. 300 of the city's most powerful figures filled the space. Executives, politicians, philanthropists, all gathered to raise funds for neurological research. Tonight's goal, $10 million. Blair Gibson stood before the mirror in his suite, adjusting his bow tie as Ross Carter reviewed the security briefing on a tablet. Every word from Ross carried weight. "This event is a high-risk situation," he warned. "Large crowd, dozens of entry points, new staff, media access. Webb could use the chaos to make a move." Blair didn't look away from his reflection. "I won't cancel it, Ross. I won't hide. Let him see that we're not afraid." Ross's jaw tightened. "Then we'll make sure he never gets close." By the time the first guests arrived, the Gibson estate security operation had shifted into overdrive. Metal detectors guarded every entrance. Background checks had been performed on all event staff, from the waiters to the valets. Hidden among the guests, several undercover agents mingled, watching, listening, scanning every face. Meanwhile, in the special children's area just off the main ballroom, Doris Gibson sat in her wheelchair, dressed in a pale blue gown. Dawn and her mother, Maya, were nearby, helping her with crafts while soft piano music played in the background. 3 security personnel stood watch. Doris was safe, or so everyone believed. Maya felt out of place that night. She had been lent an elegant silver dress by Blair's assistant, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong among people who measured success in millions. She smiled politely at guests who complimented her, but inside, she kept scanning the room, looking for Dawn, for reassurance that she was close. At 7:30 p.m., as the crowd grew thicker, a man walked through the hotel's east entrance with quiet confidence. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and carried a sleek black medical bag. His hair was streaked with gray, his expression calm, his credentials impeccable. The badge clipped to his pocket read, Dr. Raymond Pierce, neurological consultant. But this was no doctor. This was Marcus Webb. He had spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this night, studying security rotations, memorizing staff routes, and acquiring stolen credentials from a disgruntled former Gibson employee. The name Dr. Pierce belonged to a real specialist who had resigned weeks earlier. Webb had simply filled the void with forged paperwork and charm. Inside his medical bag, among legitimate supplies, lay a small syringe filled with a clear sedative. His plan was simple in theory, deadly in practice. During the fireworks finale at 9 p.m., he would administer the sedative to Doris, rendering her unconscious. Then, while guests were distracted by the spectacle, he would wheel her into a service elevator, exit through the underground parking area, and vanish before anyone realized she was gone. But even plans born from obsession have cracks. Webb had needed an inside ally, someone on the medical team who could clear his path. He found her in Stephanie Reeves, a recently hired nurse whose gambling debts made her vulnerable. $50,000 in cash, delivered discreetly through a third party, sealed her cooperation. By 8:45 p.m., the gala was in full swing. The ballroom shimmered with golden light as waiters carried trays of champagne between clusters of guests. Laughter rose over the string quartet's music, cameras flashed, and Blair stepped on stage to deliver his closing remarks. "Tonight," he announced, "we've surpassed our goal. Over $10 million raised, for those who can't fight alone." Applause thundered through the room. From her corner, Maya clapped with pride, unaware of the storm approaching. Ross and his security team moved discreetly through the crowd, eyes scanning, earpieces humming. Every signal showed green. No alerts, no irregularities. It was, by all appearances, a perfect night. Outside, technicians prepared the fireworks display along the Chicago River. Guests began to drift toward the terrace to get the best view, and as the ballroom slowly emptied, the security focus shifted outward, just as Webb had predicted. He adjusted his cufflinks, took a steadying breath, and walked toward the children's area. Stephanie was waiting by the door, pretending to check inventory on her clipboard. "Everything ready," he whispered. She nodded nervously. "Security's light inside. The others are moving people to the terrace." "Good," he said softly. "In and out. 2 minutes." He entered the children's area, offering a professional smile to the nearest guard. "Dr. Pierce," he said, flashing his badge. "Mr. Gibson requested I check on Doris's medication before the excitement outside. The fireworks might trigger anxiety." The guard glanced at Stephanie for confirmation. "That's correct," she said smoothly. Mr. Gibson wanted the doctor to run a quick assessment. Satisfied, The guard stepped aside. Webb's pulse quickened as he approached Doris. The girl looked fragile under the soft lights, her tiny hands folded over the lap blanket. Beside her, Dawn was braiding ribbons into a doll's hair, her focus divided between play and watchfulness. "Hello, Doris," Webb said warmly, forcing his tone into a doctor's calm rhythm. "How are we feeling tonight?" Doris smiled faintly. "Okay. My legs still don't move." "That's why I'm here," Webb replied. His hand rested on the medical bag. "We'll make sure you stay comfortable." As the distant hum of fireworks testing began to echo outside, Webb's fingers brushed the syringe hidden within the bag. The sound of laughter from the ballroom faded behind him. This was his moment. Years of bitterness distilled into one desperate act. But in the corner of his vision, Dawn was watching him too closely. Her brow furrowed, eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar man beside her friend. She had met Doris's doctors before. This one didn't belong. Outside, the first firework burst in a white arc across the sky, drawing gasps from the terrace. The hotel lights dimmed slightly as guests gathered by the windows. Inside the children's area, the air felt suddenly still, like the moment before a storm. Webb opened the medical bag. From the moment the so-called Dr. Pierce arrived, Dawn couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man smiled too often and looked at Doris far too long, his eyes tracking her every movement like a hawk studying its prey. During dinner, when most guests were laughing and toasting to Blair's success, Dawn leaned toward the nearest security guard, a woman with a calm voice and kind eyes named Nicole. "That doctor keeps staring at Doris," Dawn whispered. "Why's he doing that?" Nicole smiled, distracted by the chatter on her radio. "He's probably just worried about her condition, sweetie. Doctors are like that, they're paid to notice." But Dawn didn't buy it. Doris's real doctor was Dr. Chen, a kind woman with glasses and a gentle laugh. Blair always introduced new doctors personally, and this one had appeared out of nowhere. The name tag, the medical bag, it all looked too perfect, like someone pretending to fit in. Dawn went quiet, watching the man from across the room. The more she studied him, the more she felt the warning bells in her chest grow louder. Her mama always said, "Trust your gut before you trust a smile." At 8:50 p.m., as the excitement for the fireworks built, Webb entered the children's area again. Stephanie Reeves followed close behind, carrying a clipboard, her hands trembling slightly. Dawn was helping Doris adjust a blanket when she saw them. "Just a quick check before the fireworks excitement," Webb murmured to Stephanie, opening his bag. The words seemed harmless, but something in the way he said them chilled Dawn. She stepped slightly to the side, pretending to fix Doris's hair, but her eyes stayed on Webb's hands. Inside the bag, she glimpsed the metallic glint of a syringe. Her stomach twisted. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Never trust needles from strangers, Dawn. Ask questions first." Outside, the first firework exploded, a sharp crack that rattled the glass. Everyone in the ballroom cheered, rushing toward the terrace windows. The music swelled, laughter echoing. For a moment, the entire building seemed to hum with celebration. Inside the children's area, the light dimmed slightly, and Webb seized his moment. He stepped closer to Doris's wheelchair, his voice calm but cold. "Doris, we're just going to give you a little medicine, okay? Something to help you relax while the fireworks go off." Stephanie turned to the guards, gesturing toward the medicine cabinet. "Could one of you help me check the dosages? I think there's a mix-up with the labels." Two guards followed her, distracted, leaving only Nicole near the doorway. She turned briefly to glance at the fireworks outside, her radio crackling faintly. That was all Webb needed. He pulled the syringe from the bag and moved closer to Doris. But before he could reach her, a small figure stepped between them. Dawn. Her arms were stretched wide, her expression fierce. "You're not giving her anything," she said. Webb blinked in surprise, masking it quickly with a thin smile. "Hello, young lady. I just need to give Doris her medicine. You don't want to get in the way." Dawn shook her head. "Doris doesn't get medicine at night. And you're not Dr. Chen." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the distant rhythm of the fireworks outside. Webb's smile faltered, the practiced charm slipping away. His eyes hardened, revealing something colder beneath. "Move aside, child," he hissed. "This doesn't concern you." Dawn's heart pounded, but she stood firm. "It does if you hurt my friend." Webb's hand tightened around the syringe. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Maybe not," Dawn said, voice trembling but steady. "But I know what's right." Her scream came next, sharp, desperate, cutting through the cheers and music outside. "Stop! He's trying to hurt her." Nicole spun around instantly, her hand flying to the weapon at her side. "What's going on?" Webb lunged, trying to reach Doris before security could react. But Dawn threw herself forward, grabbing his arm with both hands. The syringe slipped from his fingers, clattering across the marble floor. He tried to shove her away, but she held on tight. "No!" she shouted. "You won't touch her." Stephanie panicked, rushing to pull Dawn back. "Let go of him, kid," she snapped, grabbing Dawn's wrist. But Dawn twisted and bit her hand, hard, the same move that had saved her once before. Stephanie screamed, stumbling backward, clutching her bleeding fingers. The room erupted into chaos. Nicole shouted into her radio for backup, the words barely audible over the thunder of fireworks outside. "Security breach in the children's area. Now!" Webb tried to recover the syringe, but Dawn kicked it across the floor, sending it spinning under a table. "You're not a doctor," she shouted. "You're a liar." He glared at her, chest heaving, desperation overtaking logic. The fireworks light flickered through the windows, casting red and gold flashes over his face. Outside, the finale began, dozens of fireworks bursting in rapid succession, filling the night with deafening sound. Inside, the noise felt distant, like a heartbeat pulsing around the chaos. Doris was crying now, her hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair. "Dawn, what's happening?" "Don't be scared," Dawn said, not taking her eyes off Webb. "I've got you." Webb's mind raced. His plan, meticulously crafted, perfectly timed, was falling apart because of a child's instincts. The irony stung worse than failure itself. The doors burst open. Ross Carter and two agents stormed into the room, weapons drawn, shouting orders over the thunder outside. Webb froze, his options shrinking by the second. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stand still, Dawn between her best friend and the man who'd tried to destroy everything. The finale roared through the sky, colors exploding beyond the glass as Webb's last chance slipped away. Ross Carter and four agents charged through the doors, their weapons raised. The air snapped with tension. "Federal security." Ross's voice thundered over the fireworks outside. "Drop the weapon." But Webb moved faster. In one smooth motion, he drew a compact pistol from his jacket and aimed it directly at Doris's chest. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice raw and desperate. "Stay back or the girl dies." The agents froze, fanning out, their eyes locked on the trembling man. Doris whimpered, clutching the armrest of her wheelchair. Dawn stood between them, small but unyielding, one hand gripping the handle of the chair as if her life depended on it. "You won't take her," Dawn said, her voice quivering but fierce. Webb's eyes darted to her, confusion, fury, and despair colliding in a single look. He began backing toward the service elevator, keeping Doris's chair in front of him like a human shield. The metallic door was only 20 feet away. "Don't make me do this," he barked, his knuckles white on the gun. "You don't understand." Behind the security agents, Blair Gibson burst through the entrance, his usually composed face pale and stricken. He took in the scene, the gun, the terrified children, the chaos, and his world seemed to collapse. "Marcus," he gasped, taking a cautious step forward. "Please. Whatever you want, it's yours. Just let her go." Webb's laugh came out jagged, more pain than amusement. "What I want my life back. You destroyed me, Blair." Blair's chest heaved. "Destroyed you? You sold confidential patient data to insurance companies. People lost their coverage. People died because of what you did. I needed the money." Webb roared. His hand trembled, the gun wavering between Doris and Blair. "My daughter was sick, leukemia. Do you know what those treatments cost? You sat in your penthouse signing bonus checks while I watched my child waste away in a hospital bed." A stunned silence filled the room, broken only by the muffled thud of fireworks outside. Blair's voice softened, the anger draining away. "You never told me, Marcus. If I'd known, I would have helped. You didn't have to do this." Webb's jaw clenched, his eyes glistening. "You would have fired me the moment I asked. You always cared more about your image than the people who built your empire." Dawn's hands tightened on the wheelchair. Doris was sobbing now, her small voice trembling. "Dawn, I'm scared." "It's okay," Dawn whispered. "He's not going to hurt you." Her words pulled Webb's attention back to her. His expression flickered with something, confusion, maybe guilt. "You should have stayed out of this," he muttered. "You're just a kid." "Maybe," Dawn said softly, "but I know what it feels like to lose someone. My daddy left before I was born. I was angry for a long time. But hurting people doesn't fix anything. It just makes more hurt." Webb blinked, his grip loosening. The words hit him harder than any weapon could. "My daughter died 3 years ago," he said hoarsely. "I sold everything, my house, my license, my soul, and she still died. Nothing brings anyone back." For a moment, the room felt still, time hanging on a thread. Doris's sobs quieted. Even Ross lowered his gun slightly, watching the man's crumbling facade. Blair stepped closer, voice trembling but gentle. "Marcus, look at me. This isn't the way. You can still make it right. Just put the gun down." Webb's shoulders sagged. His eyes darted to Dawn, this small, fearless child who stood between him and another terrible mistake. Her gaze didn't waver. "You can stop the hurting right now, Mr. Webb. You get to choose." For the briefest instant, his face softened. His arm lowered, the gun dipping toward the floor. The sound of his breathing filled the silence. Ross didn't waste the moment. With one swift motion, he fired the taser. 2 metal prongs struck Webb in the chest, releasing a sharp electric crackle. Webb convulsed, the pistol slipping from his hand and skidding across the floor. Agents surged forward, restraining him before he could recover. Stephanie, frozen in the corner, tried to flee, but 2 officers grabbed her, twisting her wrists into cuffs. Dawn stumbled backward as the chaos settled, her small chest heaving. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving her trembling. Blair rushed to Doris, pulling her into his arms, his face breaking as tears fell freely. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're safe." Ross secured the weapon, glancing toward the subdued Webb, who lay on the ground staring blankly at the ceiling. "It's over," he muttered, though his tone carried more relief than triumph. Maya burst through the door a moment later, pulled in by the commotion. When she saw Dawn, She let out a sob of pure relief, running to her daughter and wrapping her in a tight embrace. Dawn clung to her mother, shaking uncontrollably, the fear she had buried finally spilling out in tears. "Mama. I didn't want him to hurt Doris." Maya pressed her close. "You were brave, baby. So brave." Blair looked over at them, his heart heavy with gratitude and guilt all at once. "She saved my daughter, again," he said softly. Dawn glanced up from her mother's arms, her eyes red but steady. "I just did what anyone should do." Ross nodded, holstering his weapon. "You did more than most adults would have done." As security escorted Webb and Stephanie out, the last of the fireworks faded into the night. The acrid scent of gunpowder mixed with the sterile air of the penthouse, leaving a strange stillness in its wake. In that silence, Blair knelt beside Doris's wheelchair and looked into Dawn's eyes. "You've reminded me tonight that real courage doesn't come from money or power. It comes from people who care enough to stand up when it matters." Dawn wiped her face, leaning against her mother. Outside, the final sparkle of fireworks drifted down over the city, a soft, fleeting light against the dark. The danger was over, but the night had changed them all. A month later, the city courthouse buzzed with quiet tension as reporters filled every available seat. The trial of Marcus Webb had gripped Chicago for weeks, and now the verdict was being read. 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to kidnap and endanger a minor, the judge announced. His gavel came down sharply, echoing through the room. Webb stood silently between two marshals, his once confident posture gone. His face was older now, lined with regret more than anger. Then, something unexpected happened. Blair Gibson rose from his seat. He adjusted his tie, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your Honor, if I may speak." The judge nodded. Blair stepped forward. "Marcus and I built something once, something that was supposed to heal people. He made terrible choices, yes, but he also lost everything. I've come to understand that revenge won't heal either of us." He glanced toward Webb. "But maybe understanding can start that process." A murmur spread through the courtroom. "I'm asking the court for leniency," Blair continued. "Not to excuse what is done, but to leave room for change. I've offered to cover his remaining legal fees and arrange therapy once he begins his sentence. I want him to have a chance to rebuild something decent, inside himself, at least." Even Webb, hardened by months of shame and despair, lowered his eyes, tears welling. The man he'd hated most in the world had just offered him mercy. Outside, the courthouse steps exploded with cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Gibson, why ask for leniency? Is this your way of showing forgiveness?" Blair only replied, "A man once saved my daughter's life. I learned from him, and from her, that grace is stronger than anger." By morning, headlines flooded the news feeds. "Billionaire shows mercy to man who tried to kidnap daughter." Compassion over revenge, the Gibson hearing that shocked everyone. A week later, Maya and Dawn visited Gibson Tower for what they thought was a routine check-in. Instead, Blair led them into a quiet neighborhood lined with oak trees and stopped before a cream-colored townhouse. Maya blinked. "It's beautiful. But why are we here?" Blair smiled gently. "Because it's yours. You and Dawn deserve stability, something no one can take away again." Dawn's eyes widened. "Our home." "Forever," Blair confirmed. Maya covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Dawn turned, hugging her tightly. "We have our own home, Mama. Forever." It was the first time either of them had cried from joy. Within weeks, Blair announced the launch of the Dawn Green Foundation, a $100 million endowment dedicated to helping homeless families across the country. Its mission was simple: provide housing, education, job training, and healthcare to families who needed a second chance. At the launch ceremony, Maya stood beside Blair, wearing a modest blue suit and a calm, proud smile. "I know these families," she said to the cameras. "I was these families. This foundation isn't about charity, it's about dignity." Dawn, standing beside Doris, beamed as the crowd applauded. Their friendship only deepened. Blair enrolled Dawn in Doris's private school with a full scholarship, and every afternoon, the two girls could be found side by side, one pushing the other's wheelchair down the tree-lined paths of the campus. Blair, too, had changed. Once a man who measured his life in profit margins and quarterly reports, he now spent his mornings attending Doris's therapy sessions and his evenings reading bedtime stories. Every Sunday became a ritual. Blair, Doris, Dawn, and Maya gathered for breakfast in the penthouse kitchen. Doris loved making pancakes, even if she spilled half the batter. Dawn handled the toppings: blueberries, whipped cream, and too much syrup. Laughter filled the air, replacing the silence that had haunted that home for years. 6 months later, Gibson Neural Systems went public. The IPO broke every company record, $8 billion in valuation. Reporters expected Blair to celebrate with investors, but instead, he made another surprise announcement. He would donate 40% of his proceeds to medical research and social programs. "The success of science means nothing," he told the press, "if it doesn't serve humanity." That summer, Chicago basked under golden sunlight. In Millennium Park, the same place where it all began, Dawn pushed Doris's wheelchair toward their favorite bench by the pond. The sound of distant laughter and the flutter of pigeons surrounded them. Doris smiled, her eyes brighter than ever. "I have something to show you," she said. Dawn stopped the wheelchair and looked down. Doris focused hard, gripping the armrests. Her toes twitched, just barely, but enough to make Dawn gasp. "You did it!" Dawn shouted. Tears welled in Doris's eyes. "It's the new treatment Daddy's company helped fund. Dr. Chen says it's working." Dawn knelt beside her. "See, Doris? Good things happen when people help each other." An elderly woman nearby turned toward them, recognition flashing across her face. She shuffled closer, smiling softly. "You're that brave girl, Dawn Green, aren't you? The one who saved the Gibson girl." Dawn blushed. "Yes, The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My grandson saw your story on the news. He's been standing up to bullies at school ever since. You showed him that courage has no age." Dawn's voice was gentle. "I just did what anyone should do." The woman squeezed her hand, then walked away, leaving Dawn and Doris to feed the pigeons. Nearby, Blair and Maya stood together, watching the two girls laugh. Blair's voice was quiet but full of awe. "She saved more than my daughter that day," he said. "She saved me from becoming like Webb." Maya looked up at him, eyes glistening. "And you saved us from hopelessness. That's what real wealth does. It lifts others." They stood in silence as the wind rustled through the trees. Dawn's words carried softly over the image of her and Doris tossing breadcrumbs into the air. "People think heroes are special," she said. "But I'm just Dawn. I did what my mama taught me. See something wrong, make it right." The final shot lingered on the two girls, one standing, one seated, laughing together under the fading autumn sun. Pigeons rose around them, wings catching the light. Two children from different worlds, bound by friendship, courage, and the quiet truth that kindness can change everything. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories like this. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share a time when you or someone you know showed courage. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another powerful story that reminds us all, kindness always matters. Dawn's courage reminds us that heroes come in all sizes and from every background. Sometimes the smallest voice makes the biggest difference. Her bravery shows that standing up for what's right can change more than one life. It can inspire a world. Thank you for watching, and remember, your moment to be brave could come when you least expect it.